My son slapped me 30 times in front of his wife. He thought age had made me too weak, too silent, to ever stand up for myself. The next morning, while he sat at work, he had no idea the house beneath his life was already gone. Before I go on, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and maybe tell me where you're listening from. I'm an old man sharing pieces of a life I never thought I'd speak out loud, and your support helps me feel a little less alone as I tell this story. Thank you, truly. I've spent most of my life in quiet places, not silent, just gentle. The kind of mornings where the kettle sings before the sun fully rises and the house settles into its own soft breathing. At 72, routine becomes its own companion. I'd shuffle out to the porch of my little home in Redwood Springs, lean against the railing I repaired years ago, and breathe in the mountain air that always carried a hint of pine. When you grow old, you start realizing something strange. You spend your youth chasing the world, and your old age holding on to the few pieces of it that truly matter. For me, that piece was my son, Caleb. My only child, my pride, or at least, the memory of what that pride used to feel like. I raised him on my own after his mother passed. He was 12, an age too young to understand loss, too old to escape it. Back then, I worked double shifts at the lumberyard. Some nights I came home so exhausted. My arms felt like wood, but even then, I'd sit beside him, helping with homework I barely remembered from my own school days. He'd lean his head on my shoulder, heavy with trust, and I'd whisper promises I never said out loud. You'll always be safe. Years went by. He grew taller, stronger, and life seemed to shape him into the kind of man any father would be proud of. When he married Lena, I told myself he was starting the life I'd worked so hard to give him. She was polite enough at first, sharp-eyed, a little defensive, but maybe that was just youth. Some people carry their insecurities like armor. I helped them however I could, paid the down payment on the house they moved into, a modest 2-story with aging maples in the yard. When winter storms knocked down the fence, I fixed it myself, hammering each board with hands that shook more than they used to. They thanked me. At least, they said the words. But sometimes words sit in the air without ever touching the heart. Still, I kept helping. Parents don't stop loving. We hold on even when something inside us whispers that the love isn't coming back the same way. But little things started to change. A tone, a sigh, a hint of impatience when I couldn't hear something the first time. Dad, I said left. He'd snap. Or, you're getting slow these days. Small cuts. Not enough to bleed, but enough to sting. I told myself he was tired. Stress. Bills. Marriage adjustments. Life has a way of turning good men sharp at the edges, so I swallowed those moments and tucked them into the quiet corners of my heart. That's what old folks do. We hold hurt with soft hands so it doesn't spill out. One afternoon, I brought over a small bag of groceries, soup, bread, apples from the farmer's market. When I stepped into the hallway, I heard them talking in the living room. Their voices low, but not low enough. It's embarrassing, Lena said. He just shows up. My heart tightened, but I stayed still, listening like a guest in a house I paid for. Caleb sighed. He means well. Well, she snapped. Meaning well isn't enough. I left the groceries on the porch, quietly. Didn't knock. Didn't call out. Didn't want to add one more thing to the list of ways I apparently burdened them. Small warnings, small shifts, small fractures in a love that once felt unbreakable. But I kept coming, kept helping, kept hoping. Parents are wired that way. We hold on long after the world tells us to let go. And then came the day that broke whatever thin strands were left holding our family together. A day that still sits in my chest like an old bruise that never fully fades. I didn't know it then, but that silence I kept trying to fill, that gentle, hopeful peace, was about to end. The day it happened, I remember the smell of rain more than anything. That damp, earthy scent that settles right before a storm decides to break open. I had gone to Caleb's house to drop off a tool set he asked for. Nothing major. Just a favor. One of the many small things fathers do without thinking. As soon as I stepped inside, I heard tension in the air, not loud but sharp. The kind of sharp that tells you anger has been simmering long before you walked in. Lena's voice cut through the living room. Caleb, I'm tired of this. He's always around, always in our business. I froze in the doorway, the knob still warm in my hand. My son didn't see me yet. He was pacing, the same way he did as a teenager when he felt cornered. But now the pacing had weight, like resentment had been building in his shoes. "Lena, he's my father," he muttered. "What do you want me to do?" She scoffed. "Set boundaries. Make him understand. He treats this place like it's his house." My heart went still, because, in truth, it was mine. Every wall, every shingle, every piece of plumbing and wiring. But I never used that fact as a weapon. Not once. When Lena finally noticed me, she didn't flinch, didn't shift her tone, didn't pretend she hadn't been talking. She just tilted her head and said, almost softly, "Oh, speak of the devil." Something in Caleb snapped at that moment. I saw it, the tightening of his shoulders, the clench in his jaw. A lifetime of small resentments rising to the surface like something he'd been holding back for years. "Dad," he barked. "Did you even knock?" I swallowed. I brought your tools." He closed the distance between us in a few heavy steps. I thought he was just frustrated. Young men say sharp things sometimes. But something was different. His eyes, they didn't look like my boy's eyes anymore. "Do you understand boundaries?" he growled. "Do you even respect our space?" I opened my mouth to speak, but I didn't get the chance. His hand flew across my face, a slap so sudden it knocked my glasses sideways and stole the air from my chest. A crack sounded in the room, the kind that doesn't echo in the air but inside the heart. I blinked, stunned. My own son had just struck me. Before I could steady myself, he slapped me again. Harder. My ears rang, my vision blurred. And Lena didn't step in, didn't gasp, didn't protest. She simply crossed her arms and said, with chilling calm, "Keep going. He needs to learn." Her voice hurt more than the hit. It meant she had been waiting for this. Caleb kept striking me, over and over, open-handed but full of a rage he didn't fully understand. I lost count somewhere around the 10th blow. My cheek burned, my balance wavered, my breath trembled each time his hand came down. But then something strange happened. Somewhere around the 20th slap, I stopped feeling the pain, and something inside me shifted. I didn't feel anger, I didn't feel hate, I just felt done pretending. Done pretending he still saw me as a father. Done pretending kindness was being returned. Done pretending love could grow in a place cracked by disrespect. When he finally stopped, he stood there panting, not from guilt, but from the weight of his own fury. Then he said the words that pierced deeper than any slap. "You don't belong here. You're just old. Stop hanging around like you own the place." The irony wasn't lost on me. I did own the place, and he knew it. But he no longer cared. He wanted control, to feel large in a world that made him feel small. I didn't raise my voice, didn't raise my hand, didn't even defend myself. I just picked up my glasses, straightened my shirt, and walked toward the door. As I passed, Lena smirked. That tiny curl of her lip, a silent declaration that, in her eyes, I had finally been put in my place. I paused long enough to look at Caleb, really look. And in that moment, something in me cracked quietly. The boy I raised was gone, replaced by a man who mistook love for weakness and sacrifice for servitude. I stepped outside into the rain. Let the water run down my bruised cheek. Let the chill remind me I was still alive. Behind me, the door slammed shut, dismissive, final. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence. Neither of them called after me. Not a word, not a hesitation, just silence. And standing there in the rain, with the house I paid for behind me, and the sun I no longer recognized, that's when I knew I wouldn't stay silent again. I didn't go home right away. Old men walk slow, but that afternoon, I walked slower than ever. The rain had softened into a fine mist, enough to blur the world, not enough to hide the swelling on my cheek. Cars passed me on the road, wipers scraping, drivers glancing without really seeing. It's a strange thing to give your whole life to someone and still find yourself walking alone in the rain. When I reached my small house, I didn't bother with lights, didn't put on the kettle, didn't take off my shoes. I just lowered myself into the old wooden chair by the window, the one that leans a little to the right, and let the silence press against me. The room smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old stories, usually comforting, but that evening it felt like an empty shell. A place holding its breath, waiting for something I didn't have the strength to give. I touched my cheek. It throbbed hot and tender, but the real bruise that one was buried deeper, anchored somewhere inside my chest where no hand could reach. I tried telling myself it was just anger, a fight gone too far, a moment he'd regret, but the memory kept replaying. His voice, Lena's cold stare, the sound of my glasses skidding across the floor, and underneath it all, one truth tightened like a knot. He hadn't struck me in a moment of confusion. He had done it with certainty, with ease. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and the years began unfolding on their own. Double shifts at the lumberyard. Dinners skipped because he needed new school shoes. Nights spent rocking him through fevers, whispering promises I prayed I could keep. Christmas mornings wrapped in paper and tape, even when my hands ached too much to fold anything neatly. Love never feels heavy in the moment you give it. But in the quiet, after someone twists that love into a weapon, you feel every sacrifice all at once. Every single one. I sat there for hours, not moving, barely breathing, just listening to the room settle around me with soft creaks as the day faded into gray. Outside, the drizzle stopped, leaving behind the kind of stillness that makes even an old clock sound loud. Tick, tick, and somewhere between those ticks, the truth settled in. My son didn't respect me, hadn't for a long time, and I, blinded by memory, by hope, by love, had refused to see it. Parents do that. We cling to the child we remember, even when the adult in front of us is someone entirely different. I stood slowly, joints protesting, walked to the small table where I kept family photographs. There was Caleb as a boy, missing teeth, grinning at the camera. Caleb at 9, holding a plastic dinosaur. Caleb at 16, awkward in a borrowed suit. I traced the edge of the frame with my thumb. Not crying, not angry, just acknowledging. I don't know who you are anymore, I whispered. The photos didn't answer. They belonged to a boy who no longer existed. The evening deepened into night. I brewed tea out of habit, though it went cold before I touched it. I sat again, listened to the steady pulse of the ticking clock, thought about the house, the deed, the down payment, the repairs I'd made with hands that had worked hard their whole life. And slowly a shift began. Not a burst of rage, not a desire to hurt him back, just a quiet, steady realization. I deserved better. Better than bruises, better than silence, better than being treated like a shadow in a home I paid for. I wasn't planning revenge. Not then. Not in any fiery sense. But I was planning something else, something older than anger and sharper than grief. My own dignity. The house, the deed, the years of sacrifice that lived in those walls. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to think, carefully, quietly, take back what was mine. Not the walls and roof, but the respect tied to them. I exhaled slowly, the breath catching for just a moment in my chest, and let the room settle with me. I began to think, very carefully. If you're still listening, thank you. Stories like this remind me that patience isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the quiet strength that keeps us standing. The next morning I woke before the sun. Sleep comes in small pieces at my age, but that morning something else stirred me awake. A kind of calm I hadn't felt in years, a stillness that didn't shake or tremble. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, warming my palms. My cheek still ached, but the pain felt far away now, like it belonged to yesterday's version of me, a version I no longer needed to carry. In the soft morning light, Caleb's words replayed in my mind. You don't belong here. You're just old. For the first time since hearing them, I let the words settle. Not as wounds, but as truth. A father may forgive many things, but disrespect sits deep. It stays. It teaches. I pulled open the drawer where I kept important papers, old tax forms, insurance documents, a stack of envelopes rubber banded together, and at the bottom, wrapped in a folder taped more times than I could count, was the deed. The house. His house. Their house. The home I paid for. The home I maintained. The home I offered as a foundation for his future. I ran my hand across the paper, smoothing the edges out of habit. Funny how something as simple as ink and signatures can hold 20 years of sacrifice. And as I looked at that deed, one quiet truth rose inside me. My son slapped me 30 times, so I sold his house while he was at work. The words didn't feel dramatic. They felt inevitable. But revenge, real revenge, isn't loud or wild. It's patient. It moves slowly, like water shaping stone. It waits for the right moment, and when it arrives, it doesn't shout. It simply steps forward. I wasn't planning to destroy anything. I wasn't planning to hurt him back. I was planning something far simpler, to reclaim the respect I had allowed to slip away. I picked up the phone and called an old friend, Michael, a realtor I'd known since we were both stronger men with fewer gray hairs. We'd built a deck together behind his cabin once, hammering boards while laughing at jokes neither of us remember now. He answered on the third ring. "Mike," I said quietly, "I need to sell a house," quietly. He paused. "Yours?" "No," I murmured. "My son's. But it's in my name." He didn't ask for details. Decent men know when a friend's silence is more important than the explanation behind it. Instead, he simply said, "Come by my office this afternoon." After I hung up, I pulled out my old notebook, creased at the edges, filled with grocery lists, phone numbers, and measurements from repairs long finished. On a blank page, I wrote one line: "Take back what was mine." Not the wood or the walls, not the refrigerator or the roof, but the dignity I had allowed to wither in my son's shadow. I spent the next hours gathering everything I would need: bank statements, maintenance receipts, proof of ownership, so many memories tucked into paperwork. The porch I fixed after a storm. The gutters I cleaned when Caleb said he was too busy. The fence I rebuilt one board at a time because they didn't have the tools. Every document felt like a quiet reminder of the father I had been, and the father he no longer saw. By noon, I shaved, dressed, and chose the good blue shirt, the one my late wife always said made me look presentable, even when you're exhausted. I walked to the realtor's office with a steady pace, not rushed, not hesitant. A man stepping into his own life again. Sunlight stretched across the wooden floor when I entered. Mike greeted me with a firm hand on my shoulder, a simple gesture, but one I hadn't felt from my own son in years. We reviewed the documents together. He whistled under his breath. "This house will sell fast," he said. "You took good care of it." I nodded. I had. We filed the listing, paperwork, signatures, stamps echoing softly on the desk. Each step felt like closing a door gently but firmly. "You sure about this?" Mike asked. I didn't hesitate. "I'm sure. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but because something inside me had finally settled, a quiet understanding that love without respect becomes servitude. And I had served long enough. We set the sale date for the end of the week. Fast. Discreet. Done. When I walked home that evening, the sky glowed with a golden fading light, not triumphant, just peaceful. A softness drifted through the maples along the sidewalk, whispering like they understood the weight I'd carried. For the first time since the slaps, I felt warmth. Not joy. Not pride. Just the warmth of a man who has finally stopped shrinking himself to be accepted. Caleb had no idea. Lena had no idea. Not one hint of the storm shifting quietly above their heads. I entered my home, hung my coat, lit the small lamp, and let its warm glow fill the room. Then I said the words aloud, not angry, not triumphant, just honest. The stage is set. All I have to do is wait. The morning I chose, you could feel a shift in the air, not dramatic, nothing loud or roaring, just the kind of stillness that settles before a life quietly changes direction. I woke early, made a simple breakfast, and ate it slowly, not out of hesitation, but out of calm. A calm that grows only when a man has already made peace with the road ahead. By 8 o'clock, I saw Caleb pull out of the driveway. He didn't see me watching from behind the curtains. He drove off without a thought, unaware that this would be the last time he'd ever leave that house as its resident. I waited 10 minutes, not to be strategic, just to let the morning breathe. Then I picked up my coat, slid the folder of signed documents under my arm, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, cool enough to wake the bones. 2 cars were already turning into the driveway. The buyers. A middle-aged couple stepped out, warm-eyed, soft-spoken, polite. People who looked like they'd take care of a home, not just live in it. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes," I said. "Are you ready?" I gave a small nod. "I've been ready for a long time." We walked through the house together. Room by room, I pointed out small details. A board on the porch that creaks when it rains. A kitchen drawer that sticks in the humidity. It's strange the way we share pieces of a home the same way we share pieces of a story, slowly, gently, truthfully. They didn't rush me. They listened. In the living room, sunlight poured in through the curtains. settling on the carpet in long strips. Right there, that exact spot. I had once watched my son open birthday presents as a boy. Right there, years later, he had raised his hand against me. A quiet heaviness moved through my chest. Not sorrow, not anger, just the final closing of a chapter. We finished the walkthrough and moved to the kitchen table. The same table where I'd once prepared a loose hinge for Caleb. The same table where he once promised he'd take care of me when I grew old. Life has a sharp way of rewording promises. At 10:47 a.m., after a few signatures and a steadying breath, the house was no longer mine, and no longer his. The buyers shook my hand warmly. They left with gratitude, and I remained in the living room for one long, quiet moment, just listening to the echo of emptiness. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't victory. It was release. Before leaving, I locked the front door and slipped the key into my coat pocket. There was something symbolic in that small click, a lifetime closing softly behind me. I walked home slowly, feeling lighter with each step, lighter than I'd felt in years. Around 4 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller ID spelled my son's name. I answered with a calm, "Hello." His voice was sharp, shaky. "Dad, there are strangers in my house." "No," I said quietly. "It's not your house." "What do you mean?" "The house was in my name," I said. "And I sold it this morning." Silence. A long one. A silence heavy enough to hear his understanding fall into place. "You sold my house?" he whispered. "Our house," I corrected. "I paid for it. I maintained it. I gave it to you to build a life, not to be humiliated in it." Lena's voice hissed faintly in the background. "What did he say? What did he do?" Caleb didn't answer her. His breath shook. His pride trembled. "You blindsided me," he finally said. His voice cracked, not from remorse, but disbelief that his control over me had ended. "No," I replied softly. "You blindsided yourself." Another long silence. Then, with a small, stunned voice, a voice that suddenly reminded me of a boy who once needed me. "Where am I supposed to go?" I closed my eyes. Not from cruelty, but from truth. "That," I said, "is something you'll have to figure out, the same way I had to figure out how to stand after you struck me." He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't fight. For the first time in years, my son had nothing to say. In that silence, I whispered after hanging up, I finally felt free. No triumph, no fire, just the quiet settling of a man who had reclaimed his dignity. Sometimes the loudest moment in life is when you say nothing at all. In the days that followed, my world grew quieter, not empty, not lonely, just finally still. The kind of stillness that settles after a long, shaking storm. Most evenings I sat on my porch and listened to the wind move through the pines. Those old trees had watched me raise a boy, bury a wife, and grow old in a world that kept spinning faster than my feet could follow. Funny how the trees never hurry, never rage, never demand, yet somehow they endure. People think revenge is loud, explosive, fiery, full of shouting and broken plates. But mine wasn't. Mine was a slow exhale, a release of years of quiet disappointment, swallowed pride, and misplaced hope. Selling the house didn't bring joy. There was no victory parade, no swelling satisfaction. But there was peace, a peace I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Parents give without keeping score. We give our time, our money, our sleep, our strength, and eventually parts of ourselves we never planned to give away. But sometimes, giving turns into something else. A willingness to accept treatment we don't deserve because we fear losing what little connection remains. It took this moment, this breaking, for me to finally see the truth. Respect isn't something you beg for, and love isn't something you earn by shrinking. The day my son slapped me 30 times, so I sold his house while he was at work, a shift happened inside me. Not anger, not vengeance, just clarity. I don't know what the future holds for Caleb. I don't know if he'll ever look back and understand why I made the choices I did. Maybe life will teach him gently, maybe harshly. That part isn't mine to carry anymore. What is mine is the peace I found in standing up, not with force, but with truth. Sometimes life strips everything down to the bone so you can finally see what it means to value yourself again. Respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you're willing to pause long enough to recognize your own worth. I breathed in the cool evening air, let it fill my chest, and whispered, "I didn't do this to punish him. I did it to remember myself." And in that quiet moment, I realized old age hadn't taken everything from me. It had given something back: peace. If this had been your life, would you have done the same? Share your thoughts with me in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories told from a heart that's lived a long road, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe.